Some people rock and some people roll. Some will make you giggle right down to your soul. So talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm on Barbara and you. You gotta take a step inside the shoes of another. Get to know your neighbor, get to know one another. So talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm on Barbara and you.
Welcome to the Barbara and You Show. I'm Barbara Foster, and I sort of feel like I'm at the seaside tonight. You'll understand why in a minute. Our guest is Michelle Hanson, and Michelle has been here with us some years ago, and welcome back to the show. And we have this beautiful array of seashells, and she's coordinated everything with the beautiful tablecloth, and like I said, I feel like I'm at the seashore today.
We're on vacation today.
It's wonderful, and I'm actually going to the beach tomorrow, so you're getting me in the mood.
You're preparing, yes.
And I've never forgotten, I've forgotten how many years ago I first met you and interviewed you, but I've never forgotten you because it's an unusual story, your interest in seashells, and you just happen to be named Michelle and called Shelley.
How perfect.
Yeah, how perfect is that? I don't know well, obviously your name came first, if that influenced you at all.
I believe when I look over my life, there's no reason for me to be doing this. Except with the name Shelley, I get to be a shell. And so there had to have some kind of destiny connection when my parents named me.
Well, and I recall the last time you were here, you were hoping to find a publisher for your book.
Yes.
So this is, in essence, a success story.
I'm very happy to report I did. I did find a publisher, a small publisher in Oregon who eventually merged with Simon & Schuster. So now it's available through Simon & Schuster.
Wonderful. And that would be for the book
Ocean
over there,
Oracle.
Ocean
Yes.
Oracle. Tell us about Ocean Oracle.
Well, Ocean Oracle is actually a kit, and it comes with a couple of components. One is a companion book to explain the meanings of all the shells, so that's the educational aspect of this kit. But in addition to that, there are 200 cards. So it would be as if someone had 200 shells before them, and they're from all over the world.
And that would be like those cards we see on display there?
Exactly. These are the cards that you would
They
find
look
a
almost
sample.
like a deck of playing cards or flashcards.
Very similar.
Yeah.
And I also, because there's 200, I included sort of an overview sheet so that you can have at first a look at all the shells.
Okay, we're going to give our camera person time to
Oh,
zoom
I'm
in on
sorry.
that. That's okay, just hold it the way
Where
you
do I hold
are.
it, right
We'll see
here?
if we can get that on camera. We'll just pan down a little bit. Over 200 different shells.
Yes, there's actually 2 sheets, and you have to look on both sides, and you'll get 200.
Okay,
And
and do they, on there, they have numbers, and so that
Yes.
corresponds to the explanations.
To the deck, so
in
that
the-
if you're drawn to a particular shell, if you look at the number, all you do is find the card with the matching number. And the meanings are on the backs of the card, so you don't have to memorize anything. But the purpose of the book is if you say, why does she say that has that meaning? The book will explain, because the meanings come from the behaviors of the animals who make the shells, and some people aren't aware that actually any shell you ever see was made by an animal.
Well, I think many people, including myself, are not aware that there could ever be meanings to shells. How did you find this out? When did you become aware of this?
Well, I loved shells all my life. That aspect started from when I was very, very young, and the first time my grandparents came back from a beach vacation, which you're going to be having tomorrow, they handed their little granddaughter a couple of shells, and I was transfixed. My parents tell me this because I don't recall this, but they said, I just wanted to know everything about them. That never left me to this day. And so I started studying and finding anything I could about the animals that made the shells, how they've interacted with humans throughout history. And it turns out there's practically nothing they have in common. So when you're looking for a language, I'm looking for what's unique about this particular shell. And there's practically nothing that they have in common, so it becomes very easy to find its contribution to that language.
Really?
Would you like an example of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, anything that you look at in these animals' lives, anything, so let's take their anatomy. If you look at their hearts, there is a shell called a tusk shell, and in the books it literally said this animal had no heart. And as a young child I thought, how can anyone survive without a heart? But it leads a very sedentary lifestyle, and so the pumping of its foot circulates the blood through its body. On the other hand, An octopus is one of these animals, and now octopus is all the rage with the psychic Paul and the psychic Oscar with the World Cup and the fighting, but the octopus has 3 hearts. They're simple single chambers, but 2 go to the gills to absorb the oxygen, and then the 3rd circulates the oxygenated blood through its body. In between that, we have the quahog clam, which you may see when you go to the beach. The quahog clam has a 3-chambered heart with a pacemaker. We have a 4-chambered heart with a pacemaker. Their hearts are very similar to ours. They have no head, but just looking at hearts, you've got one now with no heart, one with 3 hearts, and one with a 3-chambered heart and a pacemaker. That's the diversity you can find in just looking at their hearts, and it turns out anything you look at has that much diversity.
And how did you learn all this?
Just through books. I lived in western Massachusetts, not near the ocean. Again, I have no reason why I was so fascinated by these animals for so long, but in reading the books, I learned a lot, and I thought it was common knowledge. And therefore, when I started doing shell reading, it was because someone saw my shells, told me that there was a shell reader he heard of, and I never knew of that concept, and I said, I'd love to go. And I was a shy person, but I hounded him for that information, and he never found it. So he sort of lit this spark that there's such a thing as a shell reading, and just to salvage something, he said, well, Shelley, why don't you use your own shells? And I responded saying, but everybody will know, you know, this one builds a raft, and this is the principle of a submarine, and this is where the color purple comes from. And I was going on, never thinking about it before, but I'd studied it for so long. And he said, I honestly don't think everyone's going to know that.
Now, what is a shell reading?
A shell reading is because they possess a language. If a person is attracted to certain shells or even bothered by certain shells, what it's doing is connecting with one's hidden thoughts and hidden feelings. It's a psychological tool. So that if you're sitting here and you know about conscious Barbara, you may have hidden thoughts you're not aware of, but they still impact your life. So the importance of knowing that information that is operating behind the scenes is you have no control over what you're doing when it's behind the scenes and you're on automatic pilot. If it's brought to your awareness, if anything is no longer serving you, then you're empowered and you have the opportunity to change those thoughts. And we create from our thoughts. If you change a thought, then you would reshape what you create. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that would impact your future.
Okay. If anybody happened to tune in late, we're talking with Michelle Hanson, Shelley, about her interest and her knowledge of shells and what we can learn. I presume we can learn from shells?
Oh, there's so much. It's really about self-growth.
Now, before I want to delve into that a little more, but before we do that, the shells that you have here on display today, which I understand are a very small portion of your entire collection,
Yes.
they're all very beautiful. They're all very polished. I don't walk along the shore, along the beach, and find things like this in the sand.
Well, some of them are bought in the store, and I think great care is taken when they're brought to the store.
Now, there's one that's we have on the monitor right now. Tell us about that one.
People may recognize that from Shell Gasoline Station.
There you
It's
go.
called the Scallop. Well, Shell Gasoline started off not as a gasoline station at all. Marcus Samuel in London had an antique store, and his best sellers, because this was Victorian times, were shells from the Orient. And so he called his store the Shell Shop. When he died, the best seller, when his son inherited, was kerosene. So his son merges with Dutch Petroleum. They become an oil company, but they take a symbol of their father's humble beginnings, hence the
That's
shell.
how they and now we have a different one on the screen. Tell us about that
That's
one.
a paper nautilus, and the paper nautilus actually is a cradle. It's only made by the female, and it's a cradle that holds her eggs. The male never makes a shell, and she looks a lot like an octopus.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think of these creatures, you call them animals, as being very small. Does it take them forever to make a shell?
Very interesting question, because when the animal is, if you think of a shell like a shirt, when you're very young, you have a favorite shirt and it fits you perfectly. Your body grows. And as your body grows, eventually that shirt, no matter how much you wish, is not going to fit you anymore.